They stopped calling her Nikki the day the banners burned. On the field outside the shattered walls, fire reflected in her eyes and crawled along the blade she carried like it had chosen her. Smoke rolled low, thick with ash and fear, but she stood steady, shield braced, sword raised, watching the enemy realize their mistake one heartbeat too late. They had come thinking this land was soft, that its people would scatter, that sparks fade quickly. Nikki of the Sparks did not fade. She had been a keeper once, a builder, someone who believed light was something you nurtured gently. War taught her otherwise. Sometimes light had to roar. Sometimes it had to scorch its name into the dark so it would be remembered. Her armor was scarred. So was she. Every mark told a story she survived. Behind her, the last of her people regrouped, drawing strength from the sight of her standing there, flame held high like a promise. Ahead of her, enemies faltered, their courage unraveling as the fire whispered a truth they could feel in their bones. This was not rage. This was resolve. When she finally moved, it was not with a scream or a charge, but with purpose. Each step sent embers swirling, each swing of her blade carved order out of chaos. And when the smoke cleared, when the banners fell and the field went quiet, stories began to spread. Of a warrior who carried fire without being consumed, of a woman who turned sparks into legend. They would remember her name, Nikki of the Sparks. The field was quiet now, not peaceful. Quiet in the way. Storms leave silence behind, heavy and earned. Nikki of the Sparks stood among the fallen, boots planted in scorched earth, her sword lifted high as flame tore skyward. Smoke curled around her like a crown, embers drifting down as if the battlefield itself refused to let the moment end. Blood and ash marked her armor, proof that victory had never been free. She did not shout for glory. She raised the blade for those who could no longer stand, for the ones who had held the line when fear crept in, for the homes behind her that still burned with light because she refused to yield. The fire answered her, roaring brighter, reflecting in her eyes as banners collapsed and enemies finally understood they would not rise again. This was not celebration. This was declaration. Nikki lowered her shield only when she knew it was done, when the threat was broken, when the land could breathe again. Around her, survivors emerged slowly, drawn by the sight of her standing unbroken where chaos had ruled moments before. They would tell stories of this day, of the woman who lifted fire like a signal and claimed the field not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. And long after the smoke cleared, one truth would remain. Where others brought destruction, Nikki of the Sparks brought an ending, and from the ashes something stronger would rise. Dawn found her where the battle had ended. The fire in Nikki's blade had softened, no longer roaring, just breathing. She rested her weight against the sword, its tip buried in the scarred earth, as smoke thinned and the sky remembered how to be light again. Around her lay the remnants of chaos, broken shields, fallen banners, the quiet proof of what it cost to stand. She had won, but victory was heavy. With her helm gone, the morning air touched her face, cooling the heat that still lived beneath her skin. Every ache reminded her she was still alive. Every scar whispered that others were not. Nikki closed her eyes for a moment, not in prayer, but in respect. The land began to wake. Birds tested the silence. Survivors moved at the edge of the field, careful not to disturb the woman who had become its final line. They did not speak. They didn't need to. Her presence said everything. When Nikki finally straightened, the flame dimmed to embers and the smoke lifted fully. She did not claim crowns or cheers. She left only footprints in ash and a promise burned into the ground. Where darkness had tried to take root, the sparks endured. And so did she. When the fires fell silent, she did not rule the land. She guarded what remained.